More, we are now joined by Unisa Senior Police Practice Professor Mpho Matlala, as well as security strategist Andy Mashaile, to assist us in unpacking all that we've seen today at the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee. A very good evening to both of you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Prof. Matlala, let's begin with Paul O'Sullivan, that we saw coming back to the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee for the fourth time today. Quite important was the apology that he had put forward to the members of Parliament, later on made to apologize to the rest of South Africa for walking out last week. What did you make of that apology, especially that many of those that were sitting in that ad hoc committee said it was just a show in order for him to avoid getting into hot water?
Thank you, Katleho, and good evening to you and to the viewers. You know, when a person apologizes, in my culture, we always say, "Ngwana aphosha diraga ha bolawe." But this is a fake apology. That was demonstrated in the condescending body gestures of sighing and looking the other way. I don't know whether the man was rolling his eyes or not. So Paul O'Sullivan is a very arrogant person, and I dare say a white supremacist who feels he's very superior to the entire National Assembly. Katlego, the ad hoc committee, or rather Parliament and its committees, in terms of the law, they hold equal status with the High Court of South Africa, which is why if you were to review anything from Parliament or any of its committees, you would have to go through to the High Court, then the Supreme Court of Appeal, then eventually the Constitutional Court. Now, imagine if Paul O'Sullivan was sitting in front of a judge at the High Court and he walked off the same way he did. A warrant of arrest would have been authorized immediately. And I think our Parliament is not angry enough on our behalf, because we elected them to be there to represent us and to be angry on our behalf. We cannot have the Parliament of the people of our country being disrespected by a white supremacist who in fact has a dodgy background of military intelligence and comes across as a non-operative cover who is subverting our criminal justice system and is in fact disrespecting our Parliament in such a way that, in the same way that the likes of the AfriForum and the Amerikaners are helping Trump to undermine our country through misinformation and disinformation, perpetuating a white genocide. All of this, to me, put together is really serious subversion of state authority and state power. So that apology is fake. I would have expected a warrant of arrest to already be out so that he can be tried and sentenced. In fact, when he got out today, I had expected a police van to be waiting to take him to the nearest police station to process him for contempt of court or contempt of Parliament, because Parliament holds the same status as the High Court.
Dr. Mashaile, do you share the same sentiments that was a fake apology? I mean, he spoke about why he had to leave so early. He was in pain. He had a flight to catch. The MK party even taking it as far as saying that the 80,000 Rand bill that he raked up for the 3 days that he was in Cape Town should in fact only be paid the least amount of that portion in relation to what other witnesses have been paid over that time. What was your take on that apology?
Good evening to you and the professor, my brother, and to your viewers. And my apologies, I'm battling the weather with the two EFCC. It was just an arrogant apology, number one. Number two, I agree with the Prof. Contempt of Parliament is what I had discussed last week with some of your colleagues in the other media space. There is no one who is better than Parliament or higher than Parliament or better than all the people in that ad hoc committee. So yes, I agree with all the punishments that have been mooted by all who sat in that ad hoc committee. But I'm happy to say, Katlego, there was maximum reputational damage. That apology was sought and was tendered to do what is called reputational laundering. It was fake aimed at covering his contempt for the parliament and the people of South Africa.
I mean, we heard from him when a number of the members of parliament were questioning him, others still coming back and saying, even though there has been an apology, there seems to still be a demeanor of arrogance coming from Mr. Paul O'Sullivan. But when we get to some of the nitty-gritties in terms of what he was asked about, Prof, Mr. Wessels, this being from the Freedom Front Plus, talked about what authority he had when he went and did lifestyle audits on those candidates that were shortlisted for the National Police Commissioner position. And he says he had been given a mandate by somebody who now denies having given him that mandate. What does this paint in terms of the ability of someone to take such personal information and go and look for what he says were skeletons in order for them not to be appointing someone who'd come in with some reputational damage? What does this give us as a picture as a country, that the possibility of having someone look out for such skeletons would do for people that are looking to take up such a position?
Thank you, Katlego. Maybe let me start with the apology, just something that I needed to also say, the apology, it does not belong in that session. The apology belongs in the mitigation of sentence. When he's found guilty and sentenced, then he can show his remorse there in a court of law. But in terms of the picture that is painted with lifestyle audits, it paints a picture of a foreign agent who is hell-bent on discrediting blackness or black excellence. This is somebody who is hell-bent on purporting themselves as a crime fighter, an ardent fighter of corruption, whilst invading people's privacies and using, because he is a civilian. He has got no right under any South African law to be investigating people, conducting lifestyle audits, accessing people's credit information, accessing people's house plans. That's invasion of privacy and the contravention of a number of protocols or laws, such as the POPI Act, such as the National Credit Act, and so forth. But what is really bothersome is, why is he doing it? It is to blatantly prove that black is incompetent. And therefore, because he's a white supremacist who fears black excellence. Here we are dealing with another version of one swart gevaar. Then in dealing with it, you try and actually discredit black excellence, that blacks cannot lead. Secondly, by fighting crime through illegal means, subverting the constitution and other laws, that is called vigilantism. He purports himself as a crime fighter, which sounds good at a moral level. But Pagat was fighting drugs and crime and gangsterism. But how they did it was by murdering people, burning Burashat Stagi, and so forth. And eventually some of them were arrested and convicted. And Pagat was eventually declared a terrorist organization. And I dare say what Paul O'Sullivan has been doing is terrorism. And terrorism, it's part of the modus operandi in terrorism. And the real reasons behind terrorism is to undermine the authority of the state. And that's why I'm not surprised with statements such as all our parliamentarians, they are all crooks.
Right.
All senior officials within the criminal justice system, they are all corrupt. That is part of the swart gevaar.
Well, let's just take one step back, Prof, and this is with regards to that 80,000 Rand bill that Parliament is meant to pay to O'Sullivan as a cost for him having stayed in Cape Town. I mean, he speaks of that being during a time when the hotels were really taken up. Let's just quickly listen to what the MK party had said with regards to some of the punitive measures that need to be taken against Paul O'Sullivan with regards to that particular 80,000 Rand cost.
I've not claimed. I only claimed for the first appearance.
For the first appearance, how much did you claim from Parliament?
I think it's about 80,000 Rand.
For one appearance?
No, that was for 2 days, 3 nights in a hotel during Indaba week. Indaba week, Chairman, there were no hotels available. So in order for me to be at this Parliament, I had to book the only hotel that was available. And it's not a 6-star or 9-star or whatever hotel, it's a 3-star hotel. And they had 2 empty rooms, and I grabbed those 2 empty rooms. And they were 10,000 Rand per night, per room.
That amount must never be paid to you from the taxpayers' money. There must be a minimum amount, and you must never receive any special treatment. The same amount that has been paid to the previous witnesses who have appeared here must be paid to you. In fact, you must be paid the lowest amount. Your amount must be rated in accordance with the lowest amount that has been paid to previous witnesses. You were not coming to a honeymoon here. You were coming to Parliament to assist our investigation. So we're going to write to the Speaker that no amount of 80,000 should be paid to you. Thank you very much.
Now, forensic investigator Paul O'Sullivan has also denied allegations leveled against him before Parliament's ad hoc committee. O'Sullivan says he never attempted to overthrow the government. He returned to the committee to conclude his testimony following last week's walkout.
Chairman, I stand by the submission that I've made to the commission, to the committee, with all the evidence, and I believe that the evidence speaks for itself. Over 36 years, I have done my best to help in the fight against crime, and like any other situation, some of it might have been imperfect, but where I've made mistakes, I've tried to rectify them. I have in no way, shape or form attempted to take over IPID or to take over the police or to overthrow the government or to possess or own any instrument of government.
All right, let's continue our conversation with Unisa Senior Police Practice Professor Mpho Matlala, as well as security strategist Andy Mashaile. Dr. Mashaile, we heard there that allegation that was made by Action SA's Darlene James when she was talking about and just laying down a timeline, how she spoke about how Paul O'Sullivan, when coming into the country, the letter that he wrote, saying that he was a white person wanting to come and contribute in South Africa, but going as far as saying that his main aim, and through all the things that he has done over the years, he misrepresented himself, and he was someone that actually was working to overthrow the government. She even took it as far as saying that he was working with the DA and some elements of the DA to want to overthrow the government. What did you make of that accusation? Because EFF's Julius Malema also contributed towards that narrative.
Exactly. When you look at the pattern and you do a pattern analysis in terms of the wrongdoing, in terms of identifying the elements of crime, you can see that what he did constituted some of the elements of crime, like going out to Tate Pasani's place, pretending to be an employee of IP and an investigator. You already see from that pattern that the intention here was to give an impression that he is above IP, he is above enforcement agencies, and therefore must be given special preference when investigations are conducted against senior holding position members of our governmental institutions or Chapter 9 institutions or any of those critical institutions. So I agree with Darylin with regards to analyzing the pattern in the same format that Darylin, Honorable Member James, has analyzed that pattern. At the end of the day, when you look at the conduct of that gentleman, Mr. Paul O'Sullivan, and do a comparative analysis from a conduct point of view, from a misrepresentation point of view, from a deception point of view, you realize what it means when Darylin Jane says this particular person had one thing and one thing only in the mind, as the professor properly captured it. The guy had in his mind undermining our institutions. Unfortunately, he met his match when Darylin James unpacked this pattern and came to that conclusion. So I fully concur with what Honorable James was saying, given the behavior or the conduct, as well as the impact and the influence he has had on law enforcement.
So we are expecting to go back to the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee any minute from now, so we might have to cut our conversation short. But Prof, when we're looking at now what is happening in the latter hours of today's proceedings, the former assistant to Paul O'Sullivan-Sarah-Jane Trent, who is appearing, and she started off just talking about her own career journey, how she joined Paul O'Sullivan's attorney's company as an intern doing some research work, and 6 years into it, she then was appointed as director. When you look at the trajectory in terms of maybe the organic way in which she grew within the organization, is it plausible that she would have moved from that position to director in such a short space of time? But also, what does it say just about the relationship between herself and Paul O'Sullivan and all the other information that we're getting with regards to the work that they did, her posing as an IPID member in some instances? What did you make of her early stages in terms of her testimony?
Look, is it possible for her to have moved so very fast? Absolutely, yes. And it is called white privilege. And it is called entitlement. But apart from her being emotional, she's very honest in her lies. You know, she says, my relationship with Paul O'Sullivan is that we were terrorizing black leaders, we were terrorizing Phahlane, and Paul O'Sullivan, we know, wanted the soul of South Africa, so he was sold the IPID for 200,000, and the 200,000 sold to by McBride, paying for his legal fees. And Sarah James was saying, no, but we did not do investigations. We assisted complainants. Later, she said she was doing research. That research was, in fact, digging up debt on people and investigating them without any official mandate. But if you look at the totality of how they have behaved in terms of white privilege and entitlement, they were doing lifestyle audits on people. What entitles them to do that? The hotel bill, white privilege again, and entitlement. What 3-star hotel charges 5,000 rands a night? And what makes him think that this is George Orwell's Animal Farm? He's more equal than the others. But the totality of what Sarah James said thus far is that, and if you take into account the fact that they perpetuating terrorism, they infiltrated the criminal justice system. Paul O'Sullivan is a member of AfriForum. AfriForum went into the US to spoil bilateral relations with the US, Amerikaners with the white genocide. The totality of it all is that it's a microcosm of what the US, white supremacist US and apartheid Zionist regime of Israel is doing to Lebanon and to Gaza and to Iran. And there are different ways other than war to actually perpetuate or to effect or to influence regime change. And this is what Paul O'Sullivan is really busy with. He's a threat to national security.
Dr. Mashaile, I saw you reacting there when Prof said she's honest in her lies. What do you make of Sarah-Jane Trent as a witness?
She was involved in a demonic intelligence gathering project that seeks to harm national security, harm our economic prospects from a international investor confidence point of view. Remember the traveling to and fro to the island of Great Britain by Ntate Paul O'Sullivan. There would be some discussions speaking about how evil the leader of South Africa are. And I will not be an advocate for those who commit crime in our leadership structures. Those who commit crime must be investigated by law enforcement agencies, authentic law enforcement agencies, at the end of the day, and get the opportunity to stand in a court of law and defend themselves. But what Sarah-Jane Trent did was to provide an attack vector for the demonic narrative that we have seen. That demonic narrative that says, I am greater than all of them, I can stand up and live. I agree with the professor. You know, if I had it my way, I would have closed the door, locked the door, and wanted the man to call whomever, whilst I call the police to say, I am laying a charge of contempt of parliament, so that we can see who has ultimate authority between you as the man who was supposed to give evidence or respond to the allegations. And thank you to Contempt. We are seeing clearly corroboration of the allegations that she has put forward through the behavior and conduct of individuals like Sarah-Jane Trent and Ntate Paul O'Sullivan. And I'm sure this is the great reset moment that we needed. And they have reset the moment themselves without even Contempt coming back again to the ad hoc committee and Mazanga to cross-examine those that have responded to his allegations to the negative.
Well, just on that note, I mean, speaking on the behavior of being mightier than the law, let's listen to this clip when Trent was questioned about which sections of the law allowed them to help IPID with investigations.
Chairperson and the two honourable members have put to you is which provision exactly were you satisfied with that you could, which provision do you rely on for the basis of being able to do these investigations based on what you've pasted in your, based on the provisions you've set out at page 9. And there are four different sections that you set out. Is there any specific one that you remember right now, or would you like to deal with that as we go along? Or are you conceding that these provisions do not apply to you?
As I understand this is that if one of the IPID investigators requested assistance, that it would be lawful and that we would be able to give assistance. And that, and I interpreted from the purposes of conducting the investigation may direct any person
Where are you reading from?
from 3A.
Okay, yes, you may continue.
Or, I don't know what you want me to say.
All right, that's Sarah-Jane Trent, the former assistant to Paul O'Sullivan. Prof, I mean, when you're listening to that response, it also goes back to what you were talking about earlier on when she said initially they were assisting IPID because they had resources, and then she went back to say no, but they were only requesting to help some of those that had complaints. And it also raises questions around the testimony that Robert McBride had given, saying that she is a good investigator. So when we start making those links between Robert McBride, who was at the helm of IPID at the time, and Sarah-Jane Trent, together with Paul O'Sullivan, assisting IPID, what do you make of that?
Well, from struggle hero to white apologist, Robert McBride entered into a corrupt relationship with Paul O'Sullivan. In fact, there is a clear quid pro quo arrangement. Quid pro quo: you scratch my back, I scratch your back. I give you, I pay 200,000, you give me IPID. So it's a good investigator for who? How is a civilian how does a civilian become a good investigator within the context of IPID, which is a statutory organization within the criminal justice system? The soul of South Africa was being sold by a former struggle hero who had become a white apologist to a white supremacist, and the sidekick that is Sarah-Jane. And look, the issue of casual relationship or social whatever they want to call it. Now I'm black, I call it mujolo. So there is nothing that Sarah-Jane can say about Robert McBride that will be credible, not unless we are dealing with a case of domestic violence between the two of them. Anything that comes out of her and it's outside of domestic violence and it involves Robert McBride, nothing credible can ever come out of that.
Dr. Mashaile, that semi-social relationship that we heard just before the closing of the session at 8 o'clock earlier on, what did you make of that confession by Sarah-Jane Trent?
There was a relationship, a romantic relationship, whether you want to call it a situationship or any other thing. For the fact that you went out to dinner, you had coffee, you did 1, 2, 3, you had breakfast, it can only come as a result of a sound relationship between the two of you. Amongst other things, informing on the operations of IPID as well as the investigating mindset of Sarah-Jane Trent. I must congratulate Mpho, the advocate. He really tore the jacket of Sarah-Jane Trent. And he was at 6 and 7, clutching at straws, even going to an extent of crying, all indicating confusion and having received a script. I mean, when there is a warrant of arrest, as you would know that I have been in that space, when there is a warrant of arrest authorized by a court of law, you can't claim to be kidnapped or abducted and many of those things. And when we say you are going to the Cullinan district, you are going to Camille's Drift, I have been at that police station on a number of occasions. When you are inside that district, Cullinan, you can be taken to any other police station. Your lawyer will be advised after you have been processed or after you have arrived at police station A or B within that precinct, that district or cluster precinct, so that your attorney can come through. For the fact that there was a warrant of arrest, it's a joke to me when you say you were abducted and you are now trying to poke holes in how the police operation netted you and napped you up for you to be given an opportunity before a court of law to explain the misrepresentation of that you made that suggests that you are an IPIT member or employee or investigator or manager or director or placed somewhere within the space and the sphere of IPIT when you are not.
Prof, maybe just your take on this arrest versus abduction. I mean, like Andy Mashaile is saying, there was a warrant of arrest that was signed by a magistrate. She went on to say that she classifies this as an abduction because of the information that she found out after the fact.
Look, Katlego, when the police have prima facie evidence that a crime has been committed or a case has been laid and there is prima facie evidence that justifies an arrest, even without a warrant, they will go and arrest. And this is, in fact, sanctioned by the law. And it's even worse to call an arrest an abduction when there is a warrant of arrest issued by a magistrate, because, you know, prima facie evidence is on a balance of probabilities. That is 50% plus true. And but when you get to a point where you obtain a warrant from a magistrate, the magistrate will not even work with around 50% plus probability. The magistrate will probably work with about 70, 80% plus probability. Magistrates don't issue out warrant of arrest like they're issuing out to the keep Moban Babanyana or some stock suites. You know, it's a little bit tightened level of prima facie. So to come up and say it was abduction, she is actually criminalizing our law enforcement agency. And if it was abduction, why hasn't she litigated and sued? You know?
Right.
So she's actually saying, I don't even care about the police. I'm untouchable. They're a bunch of nobodies. I cannot be touched. I'm white. I'm sidekick of Paul O'Sullivan. We are white. We rule the world. We are more equal than any other person.
Andy Mashaile, we were supposed to head back to the parliamentary ad hoc committee about 15, 16 minutes ago, where we expected for Sarah-Jane Trent to continue. We are hearing that she's still quite emotional, and it's really not certain whether or not she'll be able to continue. Do you think that if a witness is in such a state, it would be fair to continue with them?
You are a respondent. You deposed a statement or an affidavit, and you gave your side of the story. There's nothing that should rattle you. The fact that her statement has been finalized in the session before 8 p.m., I think she does not want to come back as a strategy or tactic to sabotage and to cripple the ad hoc committee, not to ask those fiery questions. I am sure we were going to see movies and miracles happening with regard to the questions that would be fired in her direction, and her responses would once again be at 6s and 7s. I think she is hoping that it would be a strategic move not to come back by activating the emotional component of her strategy, or to activate emotional tactics, all aimed at ensuring that Parliament or the ad hoc committee is going to say, okay, it's fine, Mami, you can go home, you have helped us, your statement has been marvelous and magnificent. It could not happen. He must come back to respond to questions like everyone else, like Ntankam Kwanazi was grilled, like the very same Paul O'Sullivan, like that Fadiel Adams who was grilled yesterday. she must come back and respond and explain to us as a civilian, investigation thing. How does she become an investigator or a researcher or an intelligence gatherer or a covert operative? I'm interested in finding out so that when we provide advice and strategic framework to law enforcement agencies and many of those institutions, we should look back at the involvement of civilians in spaces where they should not be involved, Katel.
So, Prof, would it be of any value then to continue with a witness that's in this kind of emotional state? Should she not rather come back at a different time?
Yeah, it wouldn't help to continue with a witness in that state. And Nade Mashaile is correct to say she's using shenanigans in terms of bringing the emotional aspect into the game. And if Parliament, the ad hoc committee was to continue, then she could rely on CAT, not CAT Matlala, but the UN Convention Against torture, cruel, degrading, and other degrading behaviors, you know, and it's an international convention, and South Africa is signatory to it. And when you look at torture in its context, it can be psychological, it can be emotional, and it can take very different postures. And in the actual fact, when a witness is like that, the witness is then not fit to actually continue with the proceedings. Because if Parliament, if the ad hoc committee continues, she will rely on these international protocols and other laws within our constitution to say, but the proceedings were not free and fair, or you know, they were very unfair because I was not in the right state of mind. I was extremely emotional. So these are some of the tricks that some of the witnesses would use, of course, in addition to what we're seeing in Madlanga with questionable medical certificates. So Sarah Jane was in fact coached, and this I believe, and this is just my view, the emotional part is really why self-induced, and she knew it would work. If they don't continue, she goes back to regather herself and get coaching from her legal representatives and Paul O'Sullivan. But if the ad hoc committee continues, then she has legal grounds to claim administrative issues on administrative justice. She will say it was an administrative injustice. So yes, and the ad hoc committee should really stop at this point in time. It's like questioning a witness for 7-8 hours under cross-examination. Even when that witness is not emotional, you are putting that witness under mental duress. So those are the other forms of torture.
Sure. So both Prof and Ntate Mashaile, I'm just going to close off with the same question, and you'll answer first, Ntate Mashaile. When we look at the whole situation in its most broadest, when we take it back to the 6th of July, when General Mkhwanazi made those allegations, from what we are now picking up, especially from both the Matlanga Commission as well as the ad hoc committee, are we starting to connect the dots with regards to those allegations?
Successfully, Katleho. These behaviors, the breaking down, the apologies by the Paul O'Sullivans of the world and the rest of the people who came before the Paul O'Sullivans of the world, tells us.
All right, Ntate Mashaile, unfortunately, I'm going to just cut you off there. We need to go back to the Parliamentary Ad hoc Committee. Thank you so much to both Prof and Ntate Mashaile for your contributions this evening. Let's take you back live